A group of troublemakers broke into an old church, planning to live-stream a cruel prank on the elderly caretaker. But what they didn't know was that the older man used to be a legend. There's a place tucked away in the city's heart, where church bells no longer ring, dust clings to every stained glass pane, and sunlight trickles only sparsely through the aging cracks in the vaulted roof. Locals call it the Blood Church. The name doesn't come from reverence or belief, but from a great fire over 30 years ago that burned through the main hall, leaving behind a cold, desolate shell that slowly slipped from memory. Only the basement remains lit. Dim yellow light. Not enough to chase away the dark, but enough to let one know someone still lives down there. No one knows who he is. Some say he was once homeless, taken in by a previous pastor. Others whisper he's an old soldier who retreated here after the war, now living among a few old instruments. All that's certain is that he carefully wipes down an organ tucked into a corner every day, wipes it like it's sacred. The younger generation calls him the old man with the organ. Some say the ghost in the basement. Most don't call him anything at all. They don't care. That night the air turned colder than usual. Outside, wind rustled through leafless trees, whispering like the moans of an aging spirit. But on a phone screen, inside a small room lit by harsh neon green, 3 young men burst into laughter. 1 million views, easy, said the one with spiked hair and tattoos covering both arms, typing madly on his phone. Tonight, I'm going live exposing the creepy old guy in Blood Church. You sure, Kane? Asked the one with glasses, looking hesitant. I heard someone died in there. Come on, just ghost stories for kids, scoffed the third, a short guy with Bluetooth headphones sliding a folding knife into his pocket. Just make sure you go live when the old man shows up. I'll handle the rest. And so they set off. 1 old motorbike, 1 skateboard, 1 backpack filled with spray paint, metal rods, and a GoPro. In their heads it was a simple plan. Break into the basement, mess around, record the old guy's crazy reaction, and post it on TikTok. And get views. Simple. They didn't know that tonight would be the last night they'd ever live like life was a joke. The church stood like a shadow in the city's heart. People passed it by during the day without looking. At night no one went near. But to these 3, this was a stage, a trending topic, a joke for the world. Kane started the camera, typed in the live stream title, The Blood Church Legend. Tonight we expose the basement freak. They laughed, flashlights clicked on, the camera shook in their hands like every other reckless live stream. The basement door creaked open with a moan. The wooden stairs were damaged and rotten. Each step groaned as if protesting the presence of intruders. The basement was warm, not with heat but a strange, calm quiet, still enough to make them pause. Then Kane swung his flashlight to a dim corner where candlelight flickered. A man was silently cleaning an organ. The cameraman laughed loudly. There, you see him, the older man, look, look. Then a voice rang out, low, hoarse but clear as a bell echoing from afar. This place does not welcome disrespect. The camera jostled. Laughter erupted. Hear that voice? Who's he trying to scare? The older man stood, not tall, not threatening, a dark shirt stained with machine oil on the sleeves, silver hair, silver beard, eyes bright, like the last spark left in a ruined world. He said no more, just walked toward them, slowly. Hey, old man, we're filming a documentary here. Show us that scary face, shouted the headphone guy, banging a rod against the wall. The one with glasses began to tremble, but Cain, still cocky, approached the organ, scoffing. What, this antique? You guard it like treasure, wipe it down every day like it's sacred? Let me help you polish it. He raised his foot, about to kick. But Before his foot touched the organ, an old hand, as fast as lightning, gripped his ankle and twisted. Kane screamed. It was not a bone-drake pain, but enough to knock all three off their feet. And for the first time, they were scared, not because he struck them, but because of how he did it, with calm, instinctive ease. Not too fast, not too slow, like he'd done it 100 times in 100 life-or-death scenarios. "We don't know who he is," the one with glasses whispered, but Kane yelled for backup. Soon 3 more rushed into the basement, flashlights, cameras, and suspicious bulges in their coats. They surrounded the old man. This time he said nothing, just looked at each of them, unblinking. "Keep the live stream going," Kane whispered. "Let the viewers see how far gone this guy is." The stream resumed. His face flickered in the unsteady light, but within 20 seconds, comments flooded in. "Stop! That's Chuck Norris. OMG, is that him? Turn it off, you idiots. He saved 12 American soldiers in Cambodia. I saw him on the news as a kid." The one with glasses turned pale, his headphones dropped. Kane stammered, "Chuck who?" Then the old man spoke, soft as the breeze brushing your back. "I fought in jungles you've never seen on any map. I kept an entire squad alive with these hands. You don't want to know what they're capable of." Silence blanketed the room. But Kane, still blinded by youth and TikTok clout, screamed and charged. And in a blink, it shattered. A throw. Precise, swift, so clean no one could react. Kane's body crumpled like a sandbag felled by a world champion. The live stream camera fell, lights spun. A metal rod clanged to the floor, footsteps stumbled in panic. Someone screamed, "Call the cops!" But the last sound in that clip, it was a single, clear organ note, pure, resonant, like a farewell to foolishness. The sound that remained after war. By daylight, the church basement became strangely peaceful again. After that chaotic night, everything returned to normal. Or rather, he returned to normal, as if nothing had happened, as if those punches, those terrified eyes, the city's chatter, never reached him. Chuck Norris, a name that once made enemies tremble in the Southeast Asian jungle, now lived quietly in a church basement, caring for an old organ. He woke at 4 a.m., not for prayer, he hadn't slept through a night in years. Under a dim oil lamp, his callous fingers gently wiped dust from each key. The organ was ancient, wood faded to grey, a chipped edge like a scar that never healed. He never used a dry cloth, always a warm one lightly wrung, wiping left to right, each pass a memory. Because the organ was more than an instrument. It was the last breath of a friend who never came home. Once a warrior. Chuck was born in 1940 in Oklahoma, dirt poor. His father was a mechanic, his mother is a nurse at a local clinic. From a young age, he was used to the clang of hammers, the hiss of steam from old pipes, and the dry sweat smell of hard labor. But he had an unusual love, music. At 12, he skipped school to sit outside the church piano class taught by an elderly woman, just to listen. At 16, he saved up all summer doing odd jobs to buy a used harmonica. But life didn't let him chase that dream for long. By 20, the war had called, and he went. Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. These weren't destinations to him. They were weights he carried, like boulders on his chest. He never spoke about what he did. How many did he kill? There was only one time, on a rainy night, when a young pastor overheard him whisper to the organ, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of the scream. Of the last man I couldn't save. A friend who never returned." The organ didn't originally belong to Chuck. It belonged to Paulie Dawson, his closest friend in their signal unit. Paulie wasn't a great shooter nor a strong fighter, but he could play. Paulie's music kept the young soldiers from losing their minds on jungle nights. under helicopter thunders and gunfire. They made a pact. If we make it out, I'll open a cafe with live music. You'll be security, I'll play. But on a sweep near the Khmer border, Paulie stepped on a mine. Chuck carried his body nearly 8 kilometers through the jungle dodging bullets just to bring back his wallet and a small box with broken organ keys. Years later, Chuck saved up and rebuilt the organ, just the way Paulie once described. He didn't know why he survived. Only when his fingers touched those keys, it felt like Paulie was still nearby, not speaking, just playing, living between silence and memory. After the war, Chuck didn't go home. He drifted through Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico, working security, teaching martial arts, and then leaving again. He finally stopped at a burned-down church where an old priest simply said, "If you need a place to rest, this is one." He stayed, lived in the basement, near the organ, away from people. Someone once asked, "Why don't you go home?" He just shook his head. Home is where you don't have to explain. And I've had to explain too much. And so he became a shadow in the darkness. Some thought he was insane, others called him a saint, but no one knew. Every night he played the same tune, the one Paulie wrote but never named. To children, a stranger but safe. Oddly, the street kids nearby were never afraid of him. On the contrary, if one got lost, they knew to knock 3 times on the basement door. He would open. One little girl once said, "The old man downstairs has soft bread and warm water." Another boy said, "He's fixed my bike. I don't know his name, but he's kind." Chuck didn't hug them, didn't coddle. I gave them a jacket and a piece of bread and pointed them toward the nearest help center. Still, the kids kept coming back. They didn't need a reason. And he never asked for thanks. Standing amid ruins. After the viral incident in which Chuck disabled a whole group of youths in seconds, his image flooded social media. People dug up old news clippings, found photos of him cradling a comrade's body on a battlefield, eyes hollow, broken. Reporters came. The cameras knocked. Chuck didn't answer. A young priest came to visit and asked, "Who were you?" Chuck looked at the organ, smiled faintly. Just someone who fought to preserve the beauty war couldn't take. And then a boy knocked. The story shifted again when a homeless boy, around 12, thin, with eyes far too familiar with loss, knocked 3 times on the basement door. Chuck opened it. He didn't ask anything, just handed him a bowl of cold noodles. But the boy didn't eat. He looked at the organ with eyes Chuck hadn't seen since Paulie. He whispered, "Mister, what is that sound?" Chuck replied, "It's the sound of someone I promised never to forget." The boy nodded. Then, unexpectedly, he touched the keys and played a single note. Perfectly. Chuck froze. From that night on, the night a camera captured an old man defeating a group of punks in mere seconds, the basement of the Blood Church became the stuff of legend. Some were curious, others skeptical. Some came just to see the legend. But Chuck, he didn't change. Still woke at 4. Still wiped the organ. Still refused interviews, sponsorships, and deals. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to be at peace. But the world doesn't leave peace alone. The strange boy and the organ that spoke. His name was Rico. 12 years old. No parents. No papers. No school. He came from the slums on the city's edge where people survived by looking the other way whenever a gunshot rang out. He didn't speak much, but there was something extraordinary. Rico heard music with his heart. On the 3rd day after Rico started staying in the basement, Chuck found him quietly exploring the organ, pressing each key with his fingertips as if feeling his way through darkness. No instruction. No words. And yet, the sounds he made were right. Not technically correct, but right in spirit. "Who taught you that?" Chuck asked, for the first time initiating a conversation. Rico shook his head. "No one, I just listened to how you play and my heart followed." Chuck stared at him for a long time, so long that the candlelight nearly faded. Then he stood, opened an old wooden chest, and took out a weathered music journal. Pages yellowed, the leather cover cracked. "This is an unnamed piece. It was written by someone who never got to finish it. If you want, you can try." Rico bowed his head, and from that day on, every night the two of them sat by the organ together, one remembering, one learning. But when light begins to flicker, so too does the shadow grow. They're not filming, they're robbing. Things seem to have settled 3 weeks after the infamous Blood Church livestream. But in a room across the city's east side, a group of men were re-watching the footage, not to laugh, but to analyze. They were a professional burglary gang, specialists in looting old warehouses, churches, abandoned hospitals. They didn't care for fame, only valuables. And the video revealed 2 things. There was a vintage organ in the basement worth a fortune. The man guarding it was old. Even if he knew martial arts, guns would make that irrelevant. Their leader, Rex, gave the order. Saturday night, when he plays, we go in masked. Quick job. What they didn't understand was that the organ wasn't just a musical relic. It was the soul of a man, and the living memory of a soldier who'd sworn never to fail again. The night everything changed. "Don't touch that music." Saturday night. As usual, Chuck and Rico sat before the organ. Rico played the opening notes of the unnamed piece. Chuck nodded beside him, his gaze soft, like he was listening to an old friend speak through the keys. Outside, the wind picked up. A sudden power surge flickered the lights upstairs. Then, the basement door was kicked open. 3 masked men rushed in, guns raised. "Step away from the organ." Chuck stood. No yelling, no reaching for weapons. He simply moved in front of the organ, and in front of Rico, who now sat frozen, face pale. "Don't touch that music." The leader sneered. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Chuck stepped forward, unshaken. "I'm the last man protecting what war couldn't destroy. And I won't let you, driven by greed, destroy it again." One thug raised his gun. Rico screamed. "Mr. Chuck!" A gunshot rang out, but it hit no one. Chuck had flipped the organ bench into the shooter, knocking him backward into the steel door. In the blink of an eye, he closed in on the second man, disarmed him, twisted his wrist and slammed him to the floor. Rico hid behind the organ, shaking. But in his eyes, Chuck was no longer the old man with the organ. He was a wall between good and evil, between music and madness. The warrior returns. Rex, the gang leader, wasn't ready for this. How could an older man move like that? Furious and humiliated, he drew a knife and lunged. Chuck didn't flinch. He stepped into the attack. His body said what words couldn't. "I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid of not protecting what's right." The blade slashed his arm, blood soaked into his sleeve. But in one swift motion, Chuck spun, drove his shoulder into Rex's chest, twisted the knife arm and locked him in a chokehold, learned from years in the Special Forces. Rex screamed, then blacked out. Rico stepped out, eyes wet. He looked at the organ, a tiny streak of blood on one key. He cried, not out of fear, but because he now understood. Sometimes music must be protected, with blood. The first time he let someone touch his past. Police arrived. The gang was arrested. But what they found was not what they expected. An old man with a torn arm, and a boy quietly wiping blood off an organ key with a warm cloth. Paramedics offered to take Chuck to the hospital. He refused. I've stitched wounds in the jungle using fishing line and whiskey. What I need is to finish this piece of music." Rico picked up the old music journal for the first time and did something Chuck had never done. He gave the song a name. He wrote at the top of the page, "The Song of the One Who Stayed Behind." Chuck read it, said nothing, just nodded, and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. For the first time, like a father would, the whisper at the end of the night. That night, after the city fell asleep, the basement lights still burned. Rico sat at the organ, finishing the piece. Chuck wiped the organ more slowly than usual, each motion like a farewell, a thank you, a memory. When the song ended, the boy turned around. Chuck said softly, "You know, strength isn't being fearless. It's standing up at the right moment, even if it costs you the one thing you love most." Rico looked at him, and in his eyes, Chuck no longer saw a street kid. He saw a firekeeper, keeping the flame when the flame grows weak. In life, some days pass quietly, like water flowing downstream, and then some days seem ordinary. But on the last day, you are still fully yourself. 3 weeks after the attack, part of the Blood Church was renovated. The young priest, who often brought food and medicine to the basement, started a fundraiser to rebuild a small prayer hall in the back. Rico was now Chuck's official student. Mornings are spent learning how to write music, afternoons adjusting the organ's tuning. Nights. The two played the nameless piece, now named "The Song of the One Who Stayed Behind." Rico learned fast, uncannily fast. Not technically perfect, but every note he played rang true. The chest that had never been opened. One day, after Rico finished playing, Chuck called him over. He opened a small wooden chest Rico had never seen opened before. Inside, a photo, a folding knife, and a sealed envelope. Chuck handed him the photo. 3 young soldiers stood in a military encampment, grimy, sweaty, but with fire in their eyes. One was Chuck, one was Paulie, the third, unidentifiable. "Do you know who took this photo?" Chuck asked. Voice hoarse, eyes far away. Rico shook his head. "Our squad leader, a man who never fired a shot, never barked orders. But everyone followed him, because he lived exactly what he believed." Chuck handed over the knife. His hand trembled, not with fear, but with memory. "Tell me once. Keep this knife. If the day ever comes when you must cut yourself free from the past, use it." Then Chuck gave Rico the envelope. Written on the front, "Only open when no one is left to guard the organ." The first and final performance? The young priest proposed a small concert in the rebuilt prayer hall. Nothing big, just a night for the neighborhood to hear the music and to know this place still lives. Chuck hesitated, but Rico looked up and said, "My teacher once said, music is how we let the world know we're still here." So Chuck agreed. That night, the tiny room overflowed. Elders, kids, veterans, students. Some carried scars on their bodies or in their hearts. The organ was wiped clean and placed in the center. Chuck sat. The light touched his face, not as an old man with silver hair, but as a warrior about to tell his story through sound. The piece began. Silence. Then music. Each note fell like rain on stone, and everyone held their breath. No one could say why the music sounded so unbearably sad. Maybe it was the weight of memory. Maybe it was the sound of a promise. Maybe it was the sound of a goodbye. Then, the final twist. As the piece neared its end, a stranger pushed through the crowd. Suit, dark glasses, calm demeanor. No one noticed him until he stepped forward, near the organ. "Sorry, Mr. Norris. There's something we need to clear up." Police officers followed close behind. Gasps filled the room. What's going on? Are they arresting him? No, it can't be. An inspector stepped forward. We must question you regarding a missing person case in Cambodia, 1972. A disappearance still unresolved. The room froze. Chuck did not. He stood, nodded. I knew this day would come. Rico rushed forward. No, you've got the wrong person. Chuck turned, smiled. The calmest he'd looked all night. You've learned the song. From now on, it's yours. Then he turned to the officer. I'll go, but let the boy play the final notes. Rico trembled. Tears welled up, but he nodded. He sat, and he played. Not a single note out of place. The first time he let someone touch his past. Police arrived, the gang was arrested, but what they found was not what they expected. An old man with a torn arm, and a boy quietly wiping blood off an organ key with a warm cloth. Paramedics offered to take Chuck to the hospital. He refused. I've stitched wounds in the jungle using fishing line and whiskey. What I need is to finish this piece of music. Rico picked up the old music journal for the first time and did something Chuck had never done. He gave the song a name. He wrote at the top of the page, "The Song of the One Who Stayed Behind." Chuck read it, said nothing, just nodded, and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. For the first time, like a father would, the whisper at the end of the night. That night, after the city fell asleep, the basement light still burned. Rico sat at the organ, finishing the piece. Chuck wiped the organ more slowly than usual, each motion like a farewell, a thank you, a memory. When the song ended, the boy turned around. Chuck said softly, "You know, strength isn't being fearless. It's standing up at the right moment, even if it costs you the one thing you love most." Rico looked at him, and in his eyes, Chuck no longer saw a street kid. He saw a firekeeper, keeping the flame when the flame grows weak. In life, some days pass quietly, like water flowing downstream. And then some days seem ordinary. But on the last day, you are still fully yourself. 3 weeks after the attack, part of the blood church was renovated. The young priest, who often brought food and medicine to the basement, started a fundraiser to rebuild a small prayer hall in the back. Rico was now Chuck's official student. Mornings are spent learning how to write music. Afternoons adjusting the organ's tuning. Nights. The two played the nameless piece, now named "The Song of the One Who Stayed Behind." Rico learned fast, uncannily fast. Not technically perfect, but every note he played rang true, the chest that had never been opened. One day, after Rico finished playing, Chuck called him over. He opened a small wooden chest Rico had never seen opened before. Inside, a photo, a folding knife, and a sealed envelope. Chuck handed him the photo. 3 young soldiers stood in a military encampment, grimy, sweaty, but with fire in their eyes. One was Chuck. One was Paulie. The third, unidentifiable. "Do you know who took this photo?" Chuck asked, voice hoarse, eyes far away. Rico shook his head. "Our squad leader, a man who never fired a shot, never barked orders. But everyone followed him, because he lived exactly what he believed." Chuck handed over the knife. His hand trembled, not with fear, but with memory. "Who me once? Keep this knife. If the day ever comes when you must cut yourself free from the past, use it." Then Chuck gave Rico the envelope. Written on the front, "Only open when no one is left to guard the organ." The first and final performance? The young priest proposed a small concert in the rebuilt prayer hall. Nothing big, just a night for the neighborhood to hear the music, and to know this place still lives. Chuck hesitated, but Rico looked up and said, "My teacher once said, Music is how we let the world know we're still here. So Chuck agreed. That night, the tiny room overflowed. Elders, kids, veterans, students. Some carried scars on their bodies or in their hearts. The organ was wiped clean and placed in the center. Chuck sat. The light touched his face, not as an old man with silver hair, but as a warrior about to tell his story through sound. The piece began. Silence. Then music. Each note fell like rain on stone. And everyone held their breath. No one could say why the music sounded so unbearably sad. Maybe it was the weight of memory. Maybe it was the sound of a promise. Maybe it was the sound of a goodbye. Then, the final twist. As the piece neared its end, a stranger pushed through the crowd. Suit, dark glasses, calm demeanor. No one noticed him until he stepped forward, near the organ. "Sorry, Mr. Norris. There's something we need to clear up." Police officers followed close behind. Gasps filled the room. "What's going on? Are they arresting him?" "No, it can't be." An inspector stepped forward. "We must question you regarding a missing person case in Cambodia, 1972. A disappearance still unresolved." The room froze. Chuck did not. He stood, nodded. "I knew this day would come." Rico rushed forward. "No, you've got the wrong person." Chuck turned, smiled. The calmest he'd looked all night. "You've learned the song. From now on, it's yours." Then he turned to the officer. "I'll go, but let the boy play the final notes." Rico trembled. Tears welled up. But he nodded. He said, and he played. Not a single note out of place. After the performance, the truth begins to unfold. Chuck was taken away. No handcuffs. No charges. Just gone. The media swarmed. Some claimed he was detained. Others said he left of his own will. No one knew the truth. Only Rico, returning to the basement alone, remembered the sealed envelope. He opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, slanted script, short, precise lines. The kind of writing is made for military reports. "If you're reading this, the music is still alive. I have no regrets. Some things done during war can't be explained, only carried. I wasn't arrested. I chose to leave. So you wouldn't be dragged into the price I still owe. But, I believe now, the piece has found its keeper. Keep playing, even if the world falls silent." And then, the basement lights stayed on every Saturday night. Rico, now 13, had grown taller, still lean, but his eyes had something different now. That quiet confidence is only seen in those who've already lost too much and are too young. He still lived in the basement, still wiped the organ every morning, still taught other street kids how to play the first few notes of the song of the one who stayed behind. He refused every talent show offer, every TV guest spot, every music competition. He simply said, "My teacher never chased the spotlight. I won't either." And each Saturday, he played, for anyone who wanted to listen. In the tiny chapel, some parents lost children, elders with fading memories, and war veterans in wheelchairs. All went silent when the first note struck. Not because it was perfect, but because they heard something real. A letter arrives late. One spring morning, the young priest handed Rico a golden envelope. No return address? Just one line. "To the boy who plays beneath the church." Rico opened it. Inside, a plain card, written in a firm, practiced hand, each stroke marked by the years. "If you're reading this, it means I'm still alive. At least in your heart. I'm in a place now with no gunfire, no walls to defend. There's sun here, and others who've also been lost before they were found. Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for not stopping the music. Don't come looking for me. But if the day ever comes when the music stops, and you no longer know what to do, head west for 3 days. Find the abandoned gas station called Josephine's. Behind it, there's a small house. I'll be waiting. Rico held the letter to his chest. He didn't cry. He simply stood up and played that piece again. But this time it sounded completely different. The final twist. The music was stolen. That same night, after the small performance and after everyone had gone, Rico returned to the basement to tidy up. But the organ was gone. No broken locks, no forced doors, no sound. Just gone. Rico collapsed to the ground, breath gone, heart hollow, as if he had just lost family again. No one knew who took it. Police found no trace, no witnesses. Only a scrap of paper was left on the stand where the organ had stood. We need it for an international art museum collection. It's worth tens of thousands of dollars. Sorry, a lover of the arts. Rico sat there all night and didn't eat, didn't sleep. He wasn't angry. He was empty. The stranger at Josephine's gas station. At sunrise the next day, Rico left the church. No warning. He took nothing except the old music journal and the brown envelope. He walked 3 days west, through the forest, along rusted railroads, across a foggy valley, until he arrived at the abandoned gas station, Josephine's. Behind it, just as the letter said, was a small wooden cabin, tin roof, a single plum tree beside it. He knocked. No answer. He turned to leave, but then a soft sound of a latch, and a warm, husky voice carried by a breeze that smelled faintly of the sea. You made it. Chuck Norris stood there, thinner, whiter hair, but eyes unchanged. No armor, no cane, just an old man who had finally found peace. The story that was never told. That night, under the soft crackle of a wood stove, they sat together for the first time in peace. Chuck spoke, not about battles, medals, or body counts, but about a wound that never showed on the skin. I was never prosecuted, he began. They just wanted answers. About a covert mission in '72. It went wrong. Some died by mistake. Some lived, but never came back in their minds. I stayed silent, so my brothers wouldn't be dragged through the same hell. When they couldn't find proof, I asked for one thing: to disappear. Not out of fear, but because I had spent half my life guarding a piano, and the other half guarding memories. It was time to pass on both. Rico looked at him. And the organ? Chuck smiled faintly. You think it was stolen? No, I sold it. A new organ for a new keeper. Chuck stood, walked into a small back room and returned with a box. Inside was an organ. Not the same one, but an identical replica, down to the smallest scratch. I sold the original, he said, to fund 3 copies. It was now in a war museum, so people never forget. Tom was sent to a new church in another state, where music is beginning again. And the third is for you, because the old organ was my past. But this one, this is your future. Rico ran his fingers across the keys, then looked up at Chuck. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a student. He felt like a successor, an ending that opens everything. 3 years later, a quiet April morning, in a working-class neighborhood park, volunteers had built a temporary wooden stage. No banners, no lights, just a simple sign behind the boy at the organ, in memory of the one who kept the music, Chuck Norris. Beside the stage, on an empty folding chair, someone had gently placed a pair of worn boots, laces neatly tied. Next to them, a faded photo of a silver-held man, hand on the shoulder of a teenage boy. Rico sat, 16 now. Slim, still quiet, but with hands that had learned not just to play, but to speak. He began the song, now fully named, the farewell of the one who walks away, and with every note came a story. With every chord came a life. The final message. Honor isn't found in medals. It's in how we choose to protect what's right, even when no one else dares. Some warriors wear no armor. They carry no rifles. All they have is an organ and a heart that remembers. And some music never dies, because it lives in those who were once saved by it. The end.